What makes someone an interesting person? And how can we make ourselves more interesting? Hey, welcome to ParkNotes. I'm Parker Settecase. I'm a philosopher and theologian, and this is a channel where I help you study, think, and read more deeply. In this video, I'm going to help you think deeply about what it means to be an interesting person. I'll help you analyze some of the properties, traits, qualities that make interesting people interesting. Once we have those analyzed, you can start pursuing those traits yourself, and I'll leave you with some practical notebook habits to help you on your journey. This video is sponsored by Skillshare, but more on that later. Let's jump right in. Well, first things first, you got to ask yourself, why do you want to be more interesting? Now, you probably have your own reasons because you clicked on this video, but I feel like we still need to address the why. Why try to be a more interesting person? Well, I think becoming more interesting is an upward spiral. It may not be an intrinsic good in and of itself, but it's certainly an instrumental good. It's good for opening up other things. Being an interesting person is a gateway to other goods. If you're interesting, you can attract new friends. You can avoid that trite small talk that you get bogged down in that most people hate. You can get invited on more adventures and gain new experiences and stories that will in turn make you more interesting. You may get more opportunities in your career. There are tons and tons of goods that being interesting can unlock for you. So becoming more interesting is a worthwhile goal, even if it's not the final goal, the end goal. Even if it's not an intrinsic good in itself, but just an instrumental good that will help you get somewhere else. Now, am I an interesting person? If not, then what business do I have making a video on helping you become more interesting? Well, deciding whether or not I'm interesting is not really something that I can do. That's for others to decide. I think being interesting is probably context dependent. So in one context, you might be the most interesting person that someone's ever met. But in another context, you might be really boring and trite and dull. So I think it's probably going to depend on the company that you keep. But also, I'm from the Midwest, and it's really hard for us to talk about our strengths and weaknesses. Anything that feels like self-congratulatory is gross and weird. So I would never say that I'm an interesting person. Well, then why am I making a video like this? Well, what I can say is that I'm much more interesting today than I was 10 years ago, and that's because I've used some of the habits that I'm going to talk about in the rest of this video. So let's get on with it. Let's look at some of those habits, but first, let's analyze some of the traits that interesting people have. So first up, I want you to think about the most interesting person that you personally know. Is it a coach? Is it a parent? Is it a teacher, professor, maybe a celebrity that you know, a famous athlete? Who is the most interesting person that you know? And what makes them so interesting? For me, that person is Dr. Jerry Root. Jerry's one of my mentors. We used to meet up regularly every month for 3 or 4 years. He would help me figure out what it means to be a man, how to be a scholar and still manage your family well, how to create really good scholarship. And we talked all things C.S. Lewis because he's a world-renowned C.S. Lewis scholar. He wrote his PhD dissertation on C.S. Lewis and the Problem of Evil. It's a really great monograph. You can find a link to that in the description if you want to grab that book. So Jerry is a world-renowned professor, lecturer, expert on C.S. Lewis, expert on the philosophy of religion and the problem of evil, but he was also a college football player. So he's got this kind of warrior poet mentality. He's traveled all over the world. He's a great communicator. He asks good questions. And so he's made friends all over the world. And when he goes to visit them, he collects new experiences. He collects their stories and he also creates his own. So think back to the most interesting person in your life. I bet they're going to have similar traits. In thinking about what makes people interesting, especially using Jerry as an example, I came up with 4 traits: knowledge, skills, stories, and questions. Interesting people know a lot of things and they can readily explain them to you, so they know a lot. They're also pretty wise. They can properly apply wisdom in the right situation at the right time. And they understand what they know and they can explain that to you. So interesting people have a lot of wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. Next up is skills. Interesting people can do really cool things. They can juggle, they can play the piano, they can sing, they can maneuver a tricky conversation, they can diffuse awkward moments. They've acquired a set of skills that set them apart from the mundane. They can do interesting things. Next up is stories. Interesting people have collected lots and lots of really interesting stories, and they can recount them in interesting ways. So interesting people have gathered a lot of stories, and they can tell a good story. Lastly, we have questions. Interesting people are really good at asking probing questions. These people don't often get bogged down in small talk. They don't care about that. They want to know more about you and what makes you tick. They're good at getting under that superficial level of questions. They're good at bypassing just mundane sports talk. So maybe they start with a question about the Bears and how the Bears are doing, but then they'll ask you, how long have you been following the Bears? What's the craziest thing you've ever seen at a Bears game? Did your dad like the Bears, and was that a bonding experience for you guys? So they'll take you to a deeper conversation in a way that's not forceful and is not off-putting and actually leads to a deeper friendship. So interesting people know a lot of things. They have a lot of acquired skills, they've collected lots of stories and can share those with others, and they ask really good questions. Okay, so if those are some of the important qualities that make interesting people interesting, how do we go about becoming more interesting ourselves? Well, I've got 3 big takeaways. Let me just list them for us, and then I'll take my time and dive in a little bit deeper on each one. First up, pursue your interests. Secondly, seek interesting experiences. And third, take genuine interests in those you interact with. Okay, so pursuing your interests, we can cash this out in 2 ways: growing in knowledge and acquiring new skills. So what kind of topics are you interested in? Maybe there are topics that you've already studied, but you want to take a deeper dive into those. Or maybe there are topics that you've wanted to learn more about, but you've never made time to do so. Make time to do so. Go buy yourself a Math for Dummies book or an Intro to Logic textbook. Go grab a field guide to the birds that are in your country. Go grab an art history book. Actually pursue your interests, and that will make you more interesting. You'll have more to talk about with friends and family and coworkers if you're deep diving into new topics and your favorite topics. Learning new information is diffusive. You have to go and talk about it with other people. That's actually the culmination of that new knowledge experience. It's like if you find a new restaurant, you want to just go tell everyone about that. Hey, I had this amazing meal here. Let me tell you about that. The same thing goes for learning new things. So this may be pretty obvious, but actually pursue your interests. Make time for it. Find a good podcast on it. Find some good books. Find some good YouTube videos on that topic. Take a deep dive and tell other people about what you're learning. Now, you can be kind of obnoxious with this, but don't be obnoxious. Entice people with what you've been learning instead of just info dumping on them. So pursue your interests, gain more knowledge on the topics that you want to explore. Secondly, acquire new skills. Maybe you've always wanted to juggle or play the piano. Maybe you want to write a novel, but you haven't honed the skill of creative writing. Maybe you want to start a YouTube channel, or you'd like to become good at watercoloring or oil painting. I think most of us have a list of skills that we'd love to have, but we just never pursued for whatever reason. I think actually pursuing one or more of those skills that you've always wanted to acquire will help you become a more interesting person. The more skills you have, and the more diverse those skills are, the more interesting you will be. So how do you go about acquiring new skills? Well, that brings us to the sponsor for this video, Skillshare. Now, I genuinely love Skillshare. It's my favorite platform for acquiring new skills and growing in knowledge. I've been wanting to get better at drawing for a long time. I've always been enthralled by botanical style art, especially of frogs and turtles, because I love herpetology. And I started keeping a nature log where I would draw pictures of the animals that I find out on my nature walks. But my drawing and coloring skills are really bad because this is an interest that I've had for my whole life, but I've neglected for most of my life. But thankfully, I have Skillshare to help me actually start acquiring these visual art skills I need to actually grow as an artist. Now, Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creatives, with thousands of classes led by industry experts across film, illustration, design, freelance, productivity, and more. Skillshare can help you take your career, skills, hobbies, passions, or side hustles to the next level. Skillshare has so many categories of classes: film, illustration, animation, design, entrepreneurship, how to start a YouTube channel. But now Skillshare also helps new members surface recommendations tailored to their goals by asking questions that help draw out your own interests. So even if you're not sure which class to start, Skillshare can help you with that. Now, fall usually means back to school. So this is a great time to start new learning journeys, start new productivity habits, and start acquiring new skills. So this fall, I'm starting the class, Learn to Draw, a comprehensive introduction to drawing foundations and style by this fantastic teacher, Mimi, who's the owner and illustrator of Mimochai, an independent creative studio based in LA. I just started the class and I've already learned so much from her. It's fantastic. So if you've never tried Skillshare, you gotta check it out. The first 500 people to use my link in the description will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. So find that link in the description. Let's get started today. So big thanks to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Okay, so that's the first tip. In order to become more interesting, pursue your interests. Acquire more knowledge about the topics you're interested in and start acquiring new skills. The second big tip is just seek interesting experiences. Now, this might look like taking that trip you've always wanted to take, but that can be pretty expensive. Maybe you don't have the money for that. Find interesting places around you and then go there. Take a day trip. Or if you're in a place with forest preserves, make a list of all the forest preserves in your county and then go visit each one of those. Get yourself a nature log and go find interesting animals. The animal kingdom is full of crazy stories happening all around us all the time. This animal eating this animal escaping the jaws or the claws of this animal. Go and experience some of that stuff and come back and write it down. Now, for the homebodies out there, this is going to be a stretch. This means saying yes to your friends when they invite you on their adventures. You don't have to say yes to all the adventures, but say yes to one or two more than you normally do. Just be on the lookout for new adventures. Say yes to more than you normally do. Obviously, be safe, but stretch yourself. If you can afford to travel, then go travel. Go to that place you've always wanted to go. If you're a baller on a budget, then travel somewhere that you can afford. Go visit Amish country. Try a new restaurant. Whatever the case, make it a goal to try new things and gain new experiences that you wouldn't otherwise have. Be on the lookout for new adventures and collect new experiences. So we have pursue your interests, seek interesting experiences, and lastly, take genuine interest in those you come in contact with. This is how you ask good, deep, probing, thought-provoking questions. I wish there were a formula I could give you for asking good questions, but any formula is going to be so depersonalized. So instead of giving you a ask this at this time, do this, do that, if this, then that, I'm giving you the underlying principle. Take genuine interest in people. What makes them tick? Why are they the way they are? Ask them. We all have the same number of hours in a day, and we choose to spend our time doing different things. How does that person you're talking with spend their time? What are they an expert in? This is a great way to get past the mundane conversations that are just the worst. Now, maybe some people are just duds, I don't know. But I think if you get good at asking deep questions, you can draw people out of themselves, and you'll be surprised at what they're an expert in, of what they know, of the amazing stories that they have, of the deep wounds and hurt that they've experienced. And you may end up with a new friend. So if you take a genuine interest in people, asking deeper questions will come more naturally. Most people are experts in something, or at least they're more expert on something than you are, so find out what that is and collect their stories as well. So actually pursue your interests, gain wisdom, knowledge, and understanding on your favorite topics, and acquire new skills, especially those skills that you've always been meaning to acquire. Seek interesting experiences, step out of your comfort zone, and say yes more often, and take genuine interest in those you come in contact with. I think if you do these three things, you will become a more interesting person. Now, this is my ParkNotes channel, and I am obsessed with notebooks. So it wouldn't be right if I ended this video without giving you notebook recommendations. So let me just run through 3 categories of notebooks, which can help you actually utilize the 3 tips I just gave. So the 3 categories of notebooks are notebooks for thoughts, notebooks for experience, and notebooks for self-mastery. If you want to take a deeper dive into these 3 categories, check out this video up here. But here's a rough sketch. Keep a notebook to capture your thoughts and to collect the thoughts of others. So as you're pursuing your interests and gaining new knowledge, set aside a notebook that's dedicated to the topic that you're studying. It could be a compendium or a topic-specific commonplace book, but set it aside. Here's the topic that I'm studying, and all those notes go in one spot. That way it's easier to reflect back on what you've been studying and learning and refresh yourself. The same thing could go for the new skills that you're acquiring. Get a notebook that's dedicated to that skill acquisition. Write down your notes in there. If you're drawing, get a sketchbook and actually start sketching in one spot. That way you can track your progress. Here's how I started, and here's where I'm at. Dedicate notebooks to the new things you're learning and the new skills that you're acquiring. Now, as you're seeking interesting experiences, I recommend starting a diary or some kind of log. So if you're going out into nature, get yourself a nature log, take pictures of the animals you see, start sketching them, look up information about them, and make yourself your own compendium, your own field guide to the animals that you've seen. If you're out traveling, then keep a diary for your whole trip. What happened today? How did that make me feel? Did this place actually live up to my expectations? Remember those funny stories, remember those sad events, collect your experience and abstract out the stories, and in that way you'll rehearse the stories and be able to tell them more readily to friends and family. You can also write down how you felt about conversations that happened throughout the day. Maybe write down some information about someone that you learned so that you can follow up with them later. If you're someone who prays, then write down their prayer requests and actually go and pray for them. Log your adventures, log your experiences, keep a diary of how they made you feel. And then lastly, a self-mastery notebook. You might use this in the way I do by time blocking your day. So you actually block off time to study, to acquire new skills, and to actually get your work done, or to have conversations with friends. You might also adapt some form of bullet journal. I use the 2 together, but if you want to see more on that, check out the other videos I've done. So I hope that those are practical tips for you guys. There are 3 styles of notebooks that you might keep in order to help yourself become a more interesting person. You don't have to keep all 3 of those. I do, but I'm weird. Just use whichever tools are best for you. All right, so that was a lot. Let me just summarize. Interesting people know a lot of things. They are wise and they understand a lot, and they can convey that to you. Interesting people have a wide variety of skills. Interesting people have a lot of stories from their own journey journeys, as well as from their friends and family that they've collected that they can share with you. And interesting people ask really deep, probing, just good questions. So you can become more interesting by pursuing your own interests, seeking interesting experiences, and taking genuine interest in those you come in contact with. All right, if you made it this far into the video, then you are awesome. Leave me a thinking emoji to show me that you are interested and so I can see who the real ones are. If you liked this video, then make sure to leave me a like and leave me a comment. I want to hear from you guys. Which tip did you like the most? Are there qualities of interesting people that I missed? If so, please leave those in the comments. And as always, let me know your favorite notebooks, your favorite notebook styles to keep. I love learning from you guys. All right, that's going to do it for this video. I'll catch you guys next time.